Gobert stepping up. Bang! Bang!
It's time to level up your game. Introducing the all-new ESPN app. All of ESPN, all in one place. Your home for the most live sports and the best championship moments.
The electricity is palpable.
Step up your game with no annual contract required. It's the ultimate fan experience. Level up for more on the ESPN app or at stream.espn.com. Sign up now.
Getting ready to step into your career era? Set yourself apart with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Hone your skills with apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and more, powered with the latest in creative AI. Students save over 55% so you can build a portfolio you're proud of. Launch your future with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Visit adobe.com/students to learn more.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
5 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, sit back as we continue to talk about things that are of great importance to the entire planet, and I'm sure well out into the cosmos. As we welcome you in this particular weekend, whether we say good evening or good morning to you, you're listening to Talk Radio 77 WABC, that powerful signal beaming out of the New York City region, not only to the nation, to the world, but I'm sure even out into the cosmos. And with that, we want to thank our helmsmen, as we call them, Tony and Bill, for navigating this radio station signal in all forms of electronic iteration, be it on the internet or on terrestrial radio and maybe in other conveyances. As we continue with our weekend, ladies and gentlemen, always talking about great mysteries, and do we have one for you in this Dr. Sky Experience for the next 2 hours. If you'd like to get in touch with us, we really do enjoy of the 4 different types of conversation, which are dialogue, debate, discourse, and diatribe. We prefer dialogue. So if you're compelled to want to call us with questions and comments about the upcoming guest that I'm sure you will enjoy and we will all learn something, the contact number is 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. And in a different form of the Dr. Sky Experience, we're going to be talking and focusing on one of the greatest murder mysteries in history, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy that happened in the terrestrial world and celestial world some 22,555 days ago, or simply in Earth language some 62 years ago. As the opening statements, if we were to read part of the Warren Commission, it was described, and we certainly agree, and I quote, as a cruel and shocking act of violence. A very interesting story. Many believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the assassin. This has been lingering in people's minds for what? Well over half a century, and it continues today. Our very special guest that we'll introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, of the Dr. Sky Experience for the next 2 hours is Robert K. Tannenbaum. His brand new book, That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald Did Not Kill JFK, a new Regnery book. But a brief introduction of our guest is in order. Robert K. Tannenbaum is the author of 33 books, 29 novels, and 4 nonfiction books. He is one of the most successful prosecuting attorneys, having never lost a felony trial and convicting hundreds of violent criminals. He was assistant district attorney in the New York County in the office of legendary District Attorney Frank Hogan, where he ran the Homicide Bureau, served as chief of the criminal courts, and was in charge of the DA's legal staffing training program. He served as deputy chief counsel for the Congressional Committee investigating into the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Tannenbaum also served as two terms as mayor of Beverly Hills, California, and taught advanced criminal procedure at the Bolt Hall School of Law, the University of California, Berkeley. With that, let's say good evening to our very special guest and good morning to each and every one of you. Mr. Tannenbaum, thank you for joining us on this particular episode of the Dr. Sky Experience.
Well, it's my pleasure and my privilege to have a chance to talk to you and your audience about the single most important criminal case in American history. We know who killed Lincoln. We don't know who killed President Kennedy at 12:30 in the afternoon at Dealey Plaza in Dallas. And he was pronounced dead at 1 p.m., as you well know.
Yes.
So it's a very important issue. And I always get a kick out of people who say, well, 62 years ago, what difference does it make? You know, like pass the lamb chops and the mashed potatoes.
Right.
This case cannot go unanswered. It has to be laid out, and I, without taking credit, will tell you that the way I laid out my book that day in Dallas, Oswald and I Killed the President, is available to everyone who's interested in the evidence. The evidence is overwhelming. This is not a situation where Richard Sprague and I mentioned Richard Sprague because in March of 76, he was appointed chief counsel and staff director of the House Assassinations Committee, and they asked me. I didn't know him. He was in Philadelphia. He was the chief assistant DA in Philly. He was the go-to guy on trials in the state of Pennsylvania. He was a brilliant guy. Never knew him. I was involved in doing what I was doing in Manhattan. As you mentioned, among other things, I was in charge of the criminal courts. We had 250 new cases every day. We rearranged at night, 7 days a week. And that's important because, like, take California, for example. You can have a cop arrest you on a Thursday, then no one appears on Friday. God forbid anybody should work on a Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, exactly.
First time the DA looks at the case, it's on Monday, and he throws it out. Well, what happened to the guy who was in jail since Thursday night? So we try to avoid that. And what we did was we had 150 new cases from the morning experience. That's like from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. And then from 5 p.m. until the wee hours of the morning, we had 100 new cases, basically. On the average, about, every day. And, my job was to make sure we got these cases in front of people who can handle these. It started from everything from obstruction on street traffic and right down to homicide. And notwithstanding, we had the great homicide bureau back in the day. And so everything, my job was to make sure that I can get some quality dispositions out of this whole thing, rather than just plea bargain everything away, which a lot of DAs like doing. But it's a shame because it destroys the criminal justice system if that continues.
No, you're absolutely right. A little bit of background about yourself we'll get in just a moment, but just like myself, I'm a Jamaica kid, Jamaica, Queens, and Rockaway Beach. And you yourself hail from Brooklyn. But the point of the matter is here, talk a little bit about your background, how you got interested in the whole concept of law, and then even more incredible, I find, with the connection between sports and basketball. This is an interesting story because I think it enlightens Mr. Tannenbaum, so many people out there, that through the disciplines of sports, so we grow and we learn a lot about the things that we'll do in our life, about justice and values. Talk a little bit about that because I think it's important, at least as we hear in your bio.
Well, in my bio, thank you for mentioning that, because part of the book, the introduction to the book and the story is my value system and how it happened, how it occurred. And, generally our value systems are at the feet of our parents and some visitors who come in and out of our home. But in America, we have more than that. We have a historical value system, and that's what affected me the most in that regard. It was a system where we make sure that we don't commit the worst sin in the justice system, and that is to wrongfully convict an innocent person.
Precisely.
That's not what we do. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? It means that we don't walk into a case with a predisposition, oh, the guy must be guilty, he was arrested. That's not, and believe me, I've worked with the best police in the city. And the reason I say that is two of the best detectives of 9,000. There were 9,000 detectives in New York City PD. Yes. Think about that for a moment. There were 9,000 cops in all of the city of L.A., but the chief of detectives was a wonderful man. He started out as a uniformed cop, and he assigned to me the two best detectives that everybody understood were, and we worked together on cases from inception. We were very, very privileged to have that opportunity so that we can evaluate what these cases were. And that was a big, and always been a big stakeholder as far as I'm concerned. And, of course, my parents were, they were a middle-class family. And my father was a lawyer, but he didn't practice. He went into business during the Depression. And then my mother was a school teacher. She was very active with respect to the rights of making sure that politics didn't get involved with tenure. And, again, a qualitative analysis of things, not something that you just do because you might have a friend who's a teacher who's under the gun wrongfully, I would say, on tenure reasons, and then they make the compromises to get those kinds of jobs. That was anathema to us. And on Saturday night, my parents' friends would come over, lawyers and school teachers, principals, and so on, have dessert with my family, and they would talk endlessly about what the issues were of the day. And, it was was quite an experience from playing ball. Now, I will confess, the one thing I enjoyed most during this whole period of time was whether or not I could hit the inside. I could hit the pull-up jump shot on the baseline. That was like my major concern. And I practiced enough to do it. I used to take like 100 free throws a day, for crying out loud, to make sure I would never miss a free throw in the second half and so on. But it was part of what I believed was necessary, and it was fun. Let's get them straight. Also, I enjoyed it because I enjoyed the competition. I love the competition. And the greater the competition, the more involved. And I talk about this in the book, interestingly to me, I hope to the reader, how getting involved with the notion of what college to go to, et cetera. I was very fortunate with a lot of different offers and so on. But I had a very, very, what can I say, unbearable sorrow situation. When I was 17, my mother died of cancer.
Oh, so I'm sorry, yes. Mm-hmm.
And, it's hard. It's hard for anyone. There's no one way one can act, should act, ought to act. But it was hard for me to the extent that the rules had changed. I'm, sort of philosophically bending here. Yes. And how does a person whose only existence has been to help other people wind up getting dead? What did I miss here? How did I misconstrue?
Well, it's all about the background. It's all about the training, and it doesn't hurt to have a mentor like Bob Cousy, Mr. Boston Celtic. I mean, wow, when you talk about basketball.
There was an example, by the way, because my mother had died in February of my senior year in high school. I was 17, and I wrote a letter to Coos, because I was a diehard Celtic fan, if you can believe that. All my friends were Knicks fans, of course. And
How dare you, right? How dare you be that?
That's right. My father actually took my brother and me to one game, and it was a Celtic game. It was a doubleheader, actually. And I saw this Bob Cousy. He was a master. He was a master on the floor. And as a matter of fact, there's this documentary on the air I urge you and your audience to watch. It's called Celtic City. The best one, in my opinion, is the first one, and it deals with how the filming was done, really all from games. And it was that Cousy ran the floor like no one else, and it was unselfish. When I was at camp with him, because I wrote him a letter, and I wanted to be a basketball counselor. I had like 6 of them. And it was a big camp. It was a wonderful camp. It had an old lake and so on and all that sort of things. But we were there to play ball. And I was the only one who was in high school. All these other guys, I wrote in the letter, I said, I know you have a bunch of guys there who are basketball players in college and they're big shots. And that's good for them. But I'm not worried about them. I want to learn from you. I can handle them. Trust me. Just give me a shot at it. And if I can't, send me away. So that's always been my attitude about things. It's not just a question of bragging. It's not a question of anything else. Can you do the job? I don't care. When I was in the DA's office in charge of hiring, I didn't care if the person had purple hair or otherwise. It made me suspect, let me tell you that.
Can they do the job? Right. There you go.
Can they do the job?
That's
and
right.
Are they willing to work days and nights in order to get involved in preparation? You see, it would be disingenuous for me to tell you, I won cases. Sure, I won cases, because when you're a DA and you're prosecuting, you should win cases.
And you say you never lost a felony case. I love that.
That's exactly correct. The only person who was tried more than I was Richard Sprague in Philadelphia. And that included a lot of civil stuff he did. But he was brilliant, and I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting him when he asked me to go to Washington. And that's the beginning of the story about Washington. And I didn't know him, and I said, why me? You got to... From what you're saying, you were chief assistant in Philly, and it's a prestigious position. This isn't some joke. And I turned to some mentors in the DA's office who I've known for years, and they said that he's a perfect match for you. I said, why? He says, both of you work 18 hours a day and demand.
There you go. Dedication to the job over and beyond the call to duty. Mr. Tannenbaum, this is interesting. I just want to jump in here.
In those terms. I never thought in those terms, but you know something? Cousy did an amazing thing. He changed my life.
There you go.
When I was up at the camp, and we played ball every day, and the Coos was 4-on-4s, and then we would play on the weekend the Duke summer team and the Penn summer, all the summer teams of the area colleges. It was wonderful. So the whole experience with Cousy was performance. And that's the only thing that he cared about, and sportsmanship. And I'll never forget that when I would get a rebound, it was natural for me to just power out and then hit an open man and fill the lanes and that sort of thing. And he said to me, he called the timeout right away. You'll get a kick out of this one. And he said, Bobby, look, there's only one captain of every team. I am the captain of our team. He had just 3 world championships in a row, okay? This is the summer of 1960. And I don't say anything. I'm like, oh, God, I can't believe I offended him. And he said, when you get a rebound, here's what you do. Get me the ball and then fill the lane, and I will get it back to you, I promise. And, brother, did he get it back. I'm telling you. He was so great a player and a person. He was totally, totally selfless, and that's why he was so great on the floor. You know, Bill Russell, I always maintained, changed the game as the greatest center ever. And if he wanted to score 20 a game, 30 a game, he could have done it easily. But he grabbed rebounds, not to knock him into the stands and hit some spectator in the head, but to grab a ball and hit the Kuz and break down and fill the lane. And that so much speaks for team, for being a teammate and everything else.
Well, someday we could talk about another part of the Celtics. We could talk about Larry Bird, but you know what, Mr. Tannenbaum? I want to try to do this as the host and segue this into something that I think is so incredible because, of course, when we have good mentors and we talk about ethics and the way we should run our lives with honesty, that's the thing, common sense, as you describe in your book, and I won't go through all of this. The things that you bring to these court cases are clarity, corroboration, and finally confirmation. But to set the stage, I'd like to do this so the listeners can hear this. Just in case, ladies and gentlemen, you're joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience. We're privileged and honored to have for the 2 hours here a gentleman that I find fascinating, and I know you probably already are, from talking about his early iteration in the days of sports and what helps mold men and women today into the careers that they choose. But here we go. This is quite interesting. His book, That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about a great mystery. But Mr. Tannenbaum, I'm going to play for the audience here. It's about a little over a minute to set the stage about what President Trump and the new administration is obviously looking to get into the bottom of the JFK situation. So let's hear that for about a minute and a half, and then we'll continue.
This morning, more than 60 years after President John F. Kennedy's assassination, more than 63,000 pages of unredacted files, long held secret, are now public. The highly anticipated document drop did not reveal any bombshells, but there are some new details about the CIA and how it operated around the time of Kennedy's death.
This is a pretty big deal for many who harbored the notion that there was a greater conspiracy at work. Now they'll be able to see exactly what the government had.
One of the files, known as the Schlesinger Memo, revealed that some of President Kennedy's closest associates did not trust the CIA and were skeptical of its motives. Another file pulled back the curtain on some CIA operations. The organization was tapping Soviet and Cuban telephones at their diplomatic facilities in Mexico City, locations Lee Harvey Oswald visited in the months before the assassination. This latest JFK document drop, a promise from President Trump, who signed an executive order to have the records released without redactions.
And everything will be revealed.
While the initial investigation of the assassination determined 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in killing Kennedy, and subsequent investigations confirmed that, all that hasn't stopped decades of conspiracy theories.
Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up?
I think that it will be frustrating to those who believe that there was a greater conspiracy. There are still a lot of questions, but there has been no theory that gives credibility to the notion that there was a greater conspiracy at work.
WFAA was the first news station to report on the assassination, and you can actually watch the entire first hour of coverage from that day on demand on WFAA Plus. If you are not already watching at home, go ahead and download our streaming app to your TV so that you can watch for free.
Attorney, politician, and novelist Robert Tannenbaum is our special guest here on the Dr. Sky Experience. If you'd like to join in on the conversation, we love dialogue, and I'm sure the good Mr. Tannenbaum would agree. The number, 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. So let's begin. This is fascinating. I mean, I've been to Dealey Plaza. I'm sure you've walked those sacred and hallowed grounds many times yourself. I was always amazed that the place looked to me, Mr. Tannenbaum, like a small little movie set. And when you look at the Texas School Book Depository and the alleged 3 marks in the street, I always wondered about this because, I spent some time in law enforcement, I spent some time in the military, and I've been actually, just so you know, I did acquire the same rifle that Lee Harvey Oswald had, a Model 38 Carcano. We actually took it into the desert years ago to shoot what I consider to be the sloppiest rifle I've ever shot. But talk about this whole story, that how it all relates here as to what you're bringing to the table. I find it fascinating. I mean, your premise here, and I don't want to steal away from the whole book, is that Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. Let's start the conversation on that.
Well, here's what happened, and the best way for me to do it is chronologically. As I got involved in this, I was asked to be involved in this, and it started out with Richard Sprague, as I mentioned, in October of 76, calling me up and asking me out of the clear blue to do this. And I said, with all due respect, I don't know you, and that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It probably means you're a very healthy person. Sure. And I, by the way, I do have a Larry Bird poster in my office. I just wanted you to know that, along with the coups.
Hey, now I like you more. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, he said, would you come down to Washington with me and work with me, and I will work right beside you. And we talked and we met. We did meet and so on. Anyway, I said yes, of course, and off we went. The very first week I was in, I was on the case. I got a telephone call from Richard Schweiker, Senator Richard Schweiker, who I'm sure you know. He's on the Senate Church Committee investigating. I've heard the name. Yes. Yeah, the executive response, the executive intel responses from all the executive agencies, all of the Article 2 agencies, they all have their own intel. And, of course, the largest and most outrageous of them all is the Central Intelligence Agency. I'll get to the outrageous part in a minute.
Okay.
And keep in mind, by the way, what I'm about to tell you knocked me off my chair in Schweiker's office. Senator Schweiker was a Republican. He was was known to be very conservative. He's being known to not to be a right-winger or any of that stuff. But he was not doing anything just for a cheap interview. And so he called me and asked me if I would come to his office. He had some material for me. So I said, of course. I went to his office, and he told me that there were 2 things I want you to know, both of which I know you will find incredible and painful, as I have. He said that I have here CIA files. They totally obstructed the investigation. They did everything they could to avoid responsibility, which leads me into the second thing he said. He said, I am telling you, based upon the investigation that we conducted on the Senate side of this case, because he was in charge of the subcommittee investigation into JFK. And he said that there is no doubt in our minds, that is my mind and the staff people we had, who are very, very respectful people, that participants of the CIA participated in the assassination of the President of the United States. Powerful. Wow. Yeah. When you read my materials, you'll understand where they're coming from. Well, I felt like 10 gallons of ice water just poured on my head. I'm coming out of the DA's office, and he's not a bomb-throwing politician. And yet I told him that, we have no brief coming down here. Sprague and I made it very clear to the committee that the only thing the committee can do is politicize the committee, and then we'll resign. But if you are a serious committee and you want to go forward, keep out of our investigation. This is your investigation. It's not our investigation. And they all agreed. It only took them 4 months to indicate that it was a lie. And here's what happened. Okay. In 1961, Allen Dulles was fired as head of the CIA. JFK was livid about what happened at the Bay of Pigs. He thought he was misled, and indeed he was. And this was done with Vice President Nixon in 1959. And our government had agreed to invade the island of Cuba, and that the Cuban people there would be welcoming us in open arms to get rid of Castro. It didn't work out that way. And so what happened was the firing of Dulles led to the hiring, this is very important, to the hiring of John McCone, who was a very, very close friend lawyer of JFK. And McCone and people who were running various agencies in the government, like James Rowley, chief of the Secret Service, had written to McCone saying that they were concerned about the picture that was being painted of Lee Harvey Oswald, because they knew that the American public was not about to say, oh, you mean the guy who you've been training had just coincidentally lined up to kill the president? And they didn't want to be part of it, this whole thing. And then McCone responded to the Rowley inquiry, and he said, I'm concerned, and I'm giving you this is, this is in substance. I'm concerned, he said, if this info were in any way disclosed to the wrong persons, it would lead the media to erroneously claim that this agency, the CIA, and perhaps others were directly involved in the Dallas action. That's how they refer to the assassination. And
that's amazing. I hate to cut you short, but we're at the bottom for the hard break here, Mr. Tannenbaum, and I do appreciate what you're saying. Believe me, this is powerful radio in my mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, certainly I appreciate. Believe me, we're trying to cram as many bits of information here, and you're doing a fine job. We'll return, ladies and gentlemen, on the other side of the break here, as we call it, the hard break in radio. A very special guest, Robert Tannenbaum, his book, That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald Did Not Kill JFK, 1-800-848-9222. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're in the queue, we'll do our very best to get you on the air with your questions and comments. We'll be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, or our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. Said back in the year 1770, by a man that many people might remember, John Adams. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, with our special interview for the 2 hours of the Dr. Sky Experience, we're really honored to have, as we call him, a friend of the show, attorney, politician, and novelist, Robert Tannenbaum. Robert, I'm sorry we didn't get you to finish that thought because you're getting a full boatload of callers here, as I would imagine here. So please, in all due respect.
I have it right where I left off, if I may.
Go ahead, sir.
All right, so what happened was McCone wrote back to Rowley about his concerns about, public learning about Oswald and that sort of thing. But in it, John McCone, again, head of the CIA since 1961 at this point, said that he was concerned that if the info was disclosed and the wrong persons, it might lead the wrong persons, namely the media, to wrongly claim that the agency, CIA, perhaps others were directly involved in the Dallas action. That's how they refer to it, as I left off. The Dallas action was the assassination lingo. Mm-hmm. Now, at paragraph 6 of this letter document, call it what you want, McCone went on and he said the following. While the persons involved in the assassination were in the employ of this agency, the CIA, as well as the FBI, he said it's impossible to maintain full 24-hour-a-day responsibility over its operatives. Well, I got to tell you, you want to talk about admissions and evidence. This is like when you try a case. And by the way, when I say I try a case, it's not like I put a juror in the box and then the guy pleaded guilty and I said, that's a trial. No, that's not a trial.
No, there's more to it. Right.
There's more. There's everything to it, and that's the preparation that's so necessary for all this. There's opening. There's jury selection. There's opening. There's cross-examination, summations, and that's what this is all about. And you have to put the time in order to do it. Because as I said, and I will keep saying, the prosecution has a tremendous advantage. Well, that's the way the whole system is structured. So you don't go around pounding your chest. Hey, I won. Of course, the question is, if you lost, how the hell did you lose?
Exactly. You weren't prepared. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So anyway,
I get it.
Going back on all of this material, I had also found something I found to be very, very on point on this whole issue of, there's not enough evidence about the CIA involvement here. There's overwhelming evidence, and I'll make clear on that again. But President Truman wrote a memo on December 22nd, 63. And by the way, the McCone letter is dated March 3rd, 64. And it's already been maintained, this authenticity. It was found in the 1978 archives. Dick Russell, by an individual, Dick Russell, who was a wonderful researcher in 91, included it in The Man Who Knew Too Much. I mention this because this is not me finding stuff out with Dick Sprague. We found it out. It's all there. It's all there. Now, the Truman memo of December 22, 63, said he had major misgivings that he permitted the Office of Strategic Services, our intel organization, to morph into the CIA. Why, he said? Because, and this is an amazing critique, and he said, because sometimes I've been disturbed by the way the CIA has been behaved and diverted from its original assignment. It's supposed to give information to the White House, not participate in underground activity. And he says it has become an operation. He said it has become an operational and at times policy-making arm of the government. And this led to a lot of trouble and a lot of difficulties with self-explosive areas that I don't have to mention to you. You're very well aware of them. So that aspect of it I found to be fascinating because of its involvement with the CIA. And here's something I want your audience to understand and get down on. The evidence in this case can be broken down into CIA admissions. I just read you the McCone letter. The multiple shooters that were in the grassy area there at the stockade fence.
Yeah, those are fascinating.
Those were shots that people claimed were sailing over their head. Some of them had children there, young children, and put them on the grass and covered their bodies. And so they were line of fire people. And the other one, which is no one really mentions, but it's right there for everyone to see, it's called what I call the 27-degree declination. When Robert Shaw, Dr. Robert Shaw, who was the thoracic surgeon for Governor Connolly, as you recall, in the first flurry of shots, there were 3 shots in the first flurry. Witnesses said 2 or 3. It turned out from all the facts and evidence there were 3 shots in the first flurry. And both Kennedy and Connolly were hit in the back. And they had a downward declination. And as a matter of fact, Shaw, when he was dictating, and just as I'm sort of talking into my cell phone here with you, and the doctors always recorded all this stuff so that doctor number 2 who would come along wouldn't have to start all over again. And they do it particularly with autopsies. But anyway, Dr. Robert Shaw mentioned that there was a 27-degree declination in the wounded wound that was a downward track in and out of Connolly. And that 27-degree declination, I'll say this somewhat facetiously, just coincidentally, in case you don't care about the evidence, just coincidentally has a declination from the rooftop of the County Records building in the northeast corner of Elm Street. You're familiar with that.
Exactly. Nothing to do with the Texas School Book Depository, right? Obviously, another place.
And a clear shot from the roof. Let me repeat that. There was a 23-degree declination that Shaw didn't know about. Dr. Shaw had no knowledge of this. He was just covering, explaining the declination of the wound that was a downward track. And so, but guess what? People actually went out and said, let's see what's going on from the County Records building. Of course, from the roof of the County Records building, it's a clear shot down Elm Street.
I see.
No angulation or anything like it.
Right.
And it turns out that at the County Records building in the northeast corner of Elm Street, directly to the rear of the presidential limo, was the point of entry into Connolly's back. So when people talk about other evidence in the case, I can go on about that, but I won't.
Well, you're like a lightning rod here, but I hate to catch you short here. I want to go to the callers, and obviously in due respect to the breaks here, and I appreciate, believe me, this is fascinating.
I'm here for you. I just want
let me say something, Mr. Tannenbaum. This is awesome. Let's say good morning to Tony in Clifton. She's been patient. Tony, good morning. You're on with attorney, politician, novelist Robert Tannenbaum. How are you this morning?
Yeah, strike the politician part. I'm about as much a politician. Bob Cousy was a bad
Okay,
guy.
I promise I won't use that word again. How's that, my friend?
Thank you. That's a deal.
Tony.
And I won't say Mayor Tannenbaum.
There you go.
I was very interested in one particular aspect of the Kennedy piece that caught my attention, and it was on the James Garrison prosecution of Clay Shaw, saying that Clay Shaw, David Ferry, and were involved with Lee Harvey in the case of the assassination case of JFK. The case was dismissed. They later went on to sort of weaponize and throw other claims against Jim Garrison, who passed away in 92, saying that he did bad things. It was sort of the weaponization thing. To me, that case was dismissed in less than an hour. Can you tell us anything about your thoughts about that? I thought that was key of how that just went away.
Great points, Tony, and we're going to have to do this, Robert, in just about a 3-minute mark here. But, Tony, stay with us on this because we want to give everybody who calls at least an opportunity.
This is a wonderful type question because what I tried to avoid was getting involved in the Tippit case portion of it all. And all the other issues that abound about Oswald, and it included the car, a squad car passing in front of the house he was staying in. Ruth Payne had gotten the house. Ruth Payne, a CIA operative, got him the job in the depository like 6 weeks before the assassination, and the squad car person who was in uniform hit the horn and then Oswald left. He had changed his jacket. He was like, a substantial distance away now from the depository, and yet a squad car stops him as a suspect. A suspect in what? I purposely avoided getting into all that because it's a whole hornet's nest. And I will tell you this. Richard Sprague and I chased every rabbit hole you can have in this case. Mm-hmm. And that included the vice president, that included all the other players in this thing. And there was then the organized crime people, et cetera. There was no other explanation for what happened here other than what the evidence revealed, and that is that, regrettably, heartbreakingly, an agency of our government participated in the assassination of the President of the United States.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. Tony, you get the last word here as we try to fit as many callers in throughout the 2-hour program. Your final comment.
I think that's so true. I think our CIA needs to be disbanded, and I thank you for all your work, and God bless.
Well, Tony, it's always a pleasure to have you on the Dr. Sky Experience. This is interesting, Mr. Tannenbaum. I've studied this, and when we come back from the break in a couple of minutes here, and I know we have to have breaks, that's part of what we do, you understand that, but even, more important than that, let's come back after this break, and maybe you can tease it for a minute or two. Who the heck was Lee Harvey Oswald? I mean, I've read so many books. Talked to, of course, Vincent Bugliosi. You heard Vincent with his 1,632-page book, Not Laughing, called Reclaiming History, where he claims that Lee Harvey Oswald is the singular assassin there. But who was Lee Harvey Oswald? In just a minute or two, and then we'll carry it on the other side of the break. I was just curious if you could tell us who that is, in your mind.
No, I'm with you. Don't worry about it.
Well, we'll give it one more time, and I think we lost Mr. Tannenbaum there for a moment.
No, I'm here.
You are? I'm sorry, sir. We couldn't hear you. No, I wanted you to just give us a quick analysis of who Lee Harvey Oswald is. We got a break in about a minute or two, but if you can start that conversation.
I have a note or two about that for you, so don't worry about that.
Okay, not a problem. All right, let's do this, ladies. Let's take our break, and we come back. We'll continue with your calls. The caller board, is lit up like a Christmas tree here, as we would expect, with the great conversation we're having. More with attorney and novelist. Notice I dropped politician out of it. Robert Tannenbaum, his book, and I recommend everybody get this. It goes to our bookshelf, and it should be on yours, in our opinion. That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. We'll be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
47 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, a privilege and honor to have for the entire 2 hours of the Dr. Sky Experience. He himself, attorney, novelist Robert Tannenbaum. The book we're discussing that we recommend everybody within the sound of the power of Talk Radio 77 WABC get a copy of, and that is That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. Mr. Tannenbaum, let's continue with the callers. They're lighting up like a Christmas tree here or whatever celebratory tree you would happen to have. Let's say good morning from my home state, Mark in Arizona. Good morning, Mark. How you doing today?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Tannenbaum. I'm enjoying the conversation. My mother was born in Brooklyn. I really understand where you're coming from. I was just wondering if you were aware that the OSS also killed Patton, number one, and were you also aware that there was a book written called Dr. Mary's Monkey by Ed Haslam a few years back, and he said that Oswald was involved in medical tests in New Orleans and with the government, they were working on a cancer virus to try to kill Castro, and they said that this virus was put into our polio vaccines, not the first batch, but possibly the second batch back in the 60s. I wonder if you ever heard of that. And also, Clint Hill spoke in a bookstore here in Arizona about 15 years ago and said the reason they wouldn't open up the Kennedy files was because they wanted to give the Kennedy family privacy on their tax returns. I swear to God.
Wow. That's amazing. Wow. What say you, sir? That's a lot.
All right,
there,
now you
Mark.
wanted me. Let me respond to this because I also want to mention who Oswald was.
Yes, I'd like to get to that.
James Angleton, who was our counter-intel czar, ran LHO, ran Oswald as a fake defector to the Soviet Union in 1959. That's how far back he goes, even further in a moment. Oswald had been a CIA asset since 1957. At the time of his recruitment into Angleton's operation, Oswald was a radar operator working at the CIA's top-secret Lockheed U-2 Air Base in Atsugi, Japan. Oswald, the Marine, had been stationed at Atsugi since 1957, tracking the CIA spy planes over the Soviet Union and China. Oswald was also being run by a highly compartmentalized CIA counter-intel unit responsible only to Angleton, who only wanted Oswald to flesh out the mole at Langley. And the mole was that the U-2 flights that he was monitoring was no insignificant job because one of them got shot down and Gary Powers was the pilot. I'm sure you remember that.
I sure do, and we could do shows about that, sir, because we've had those pilots on, not the namesake, but others that flew those during the Cold War. It's fascinating.
Right. Well, think about it for a second. It's important to note, you just don't go to an airport and get into a U-2 flight and fly around the universe.
No, you don't.
See what's in your refrigerator or in my refrigerator from 30,000 feet. It doesn't work that way. But I did want to mention that to you, that he was a very important player in this whole thing, going back to 57. He's not some kook that they just hooked onto in any respect. So as far as the other questions go, there is something I want to mention to you about what the government did here. And it's very, very sinister, because the bottom line here is that the science that the government claimed existed about this case was known to be invalid and otherwise inherently unworthy of belief. It was an intentional contrivance, and here's what I mean by that. The government now was being investigated by the FBI. It was like, wait a minute, all of a sudden we're getting involved in the assassination of the president here. Hold on, hold tight horses.
Yeah, that's right.
And they came out what they called neutron activation analysis, NAA. Neutron activation analysis was an invalid principal testing component for comparative bullet-lead analysis, CBLA. What is all that mumbo jumbo? What it means is that the government was saying, as a result of neutron activation analysis, the so-called principal testing component, they didn't say it was invalid, the principal testing component for comparative bullet-lead analysis meant that you can match a fragment of a bullet to a fragment of a bullet, and there were two large fragments in the limo. So they claimed in the limo there was one missile. They broke apart, but you can match them because of NAA, neutron activation analysis. And then they said the other piece was fragments were taken out of Governor Connolly's wrist, and that they matched the magic bullet. That they were, even though it was pristine in nature and the rest of it, which is total nonsense for anybody.
Right, the bullet should have had a lot more deformation, and it didn't have much of anything. It looked pristine, like you just took it before it was fired.
And keep in mind, no one needs to take notes tonight because everything I'm telling you is in this book, and that's why I'm telling you, it's all there. The evidence is there to pick it up and move with it. It's not something that Sprague and I keep saying it because it's important to me.
Mark, if you're still with us, you get the final word because we're running to the top of the hour here. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are still on the line with us, we'll do our very best to get as many of your calls and questions in the form of dialogue if we didn't, of course, succeed in hour one. Mark, any final closing comment from you?
I just would like to know if Dr. Haslam or Mr. Haslam if he ever heard about him working with the government on a cancer virus that they tried to give to Castro, and it backfired. They put it into our vaccines in the 60s, polio vaccine.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was trying to avoid, is to getting into all these tangential serious issues.
No, I understand.
Let me just finish, guy, for 1 second here.
Yes, sir.
The neutron activation analysis says that the government said, if you don't believe in NAA, neutron activation analysis, then you believe you're a dummy and that you believe that the world is flat. Well, here's really what happened. No one in the government decided to talk to metallurgical PhDs, experts. And when the experts found out what was going on from newspaper articles, they wrote serious critiques. And it became clear that NAA was an invalid alleged science. This is what the government was telling the people makes their case ironclad. Now, I could go on about a lot of this stuff where the government has lied to the American people, and in that whole area of the CIA admission in the McCone letter, the multiple shooters, the line of fire, and the 27-degree declination are just several of the areas that are very critical in this whole case. And one of them comes into what we call minute metallic fragments. Minute metallic fragments were, if someone would shoot me in the back of the head right now, I'm at a table, I would not have any minute metallic fragments in my forehead. Mm-hmm. The minute metallic fragments in JFK's head were at the side of his head, ranging high in the right temple, and it showed a gray cloud. And what is the significance of this? The government has never mentioned this at all. This was the result of the fourth shot that blew JFK's head off. And the minute metallic fragments tell us the direction of the entry and the point of entry. And our government has never decided that you can do the following can happen. And this is where I want you to hear this. This is important.
Go ahead.
Film, because of Zapruder. And in that Zapruder film, we see the president's head and his temple being hit above his right ear. The shot caused JFK's head to violently snap back. Everybody who's listening to this, I hope, has seen this. This shot caused JFK's head to snap back and to the left, leaving him immobile, bodily depressed, and slumped dead in his wife's shoulder. Well,
no, that's amazing.
From the back. How do you have a shot hit somebody in the back of his head and his head goes back?
And you also talk about blood splatter, that is, on Clint Hill, on his face and forehead, and also one of the motorcycle officers that
Bobby
you talk
Harkin.
about. Yes.
Bobby
Let me
Harkin.
thank Mark. Let me just thank Mark in Arizona. Mark, we're kind of short on time here, but never without lack of interest. So thank you for your questions and concerns. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, as we go to the top of hour one, if we haven't gotten you on the line and you so are inclined to want to stay on the line, we'll do our very best to get in touch with you so you can speak your piece and speak your mind. 1-800-848-9222. Got about 3 minutes before the top of the hour. You have the floor to finish that concept, which is fascinating in the book, That Day in Dallas.
Well, again, the minute metallic fragments, it's just overwhelming evidence here. But the real pernicious nature of this is, why is the government, through the CIA, lying to the American public? Why are they talking about neutron activation analysis? It's invalid. Everyone knows that now. And the proof of the pudding is that when it became so damning that it was a lie, the government shut down the only lab that we had on September 1st, 2005. That was the lab that measured with the help of metallurgical PhDs what was valid with respect to anything other than an NAA, because the NAA was invalid. And the rest of the government's case was not worthy of belief. That's what's going on here.
Well, in hour number two, as we continue here with you, Mr. Tannenbaum, this is interesting. I've done a lot of shooting in my life from, military and law enforcement, all, of course, in the pursuit of marksmanship. And I can just tell you this way. When we look at some of the evidence in your book, That Day in Dallas, we see no deformation on one of those particular bullets, which is a strange bullet, as you know. The Carcano round, the 6.5 by 52, is a very unusual round. But once again, I'll repeat, and I think you heard me, maybe the audience didn't tune in yet. I had that particular rifle, purposely took it to a range, set up in these little flour sacks, like Pillsbury flour, at the alleged distance that Oswald used to shoot. And you know what? This is amazing, and I'm saying this to everybody listening around the world, that was one of the sloppiest rifles I could have ever shot. And is this true, Mr. Tannenbaum? When they recovered the rifle, we'll get into that in hour two, that allegedly there was a fingerprint on the trigger guard, but that's also in conflict with some of the things in your book. Right?
And it's also meaningless. Look, if in fact there were prints on this, the government was claiming it's his rifle. So what's the big deal?
Exactly.
The truth is that the whole government case on that is a major lie about who found it and whether or not and why the person who found it, Lieutenant Day, why he never told anybody that he found a print. And when the FBI wanted to see that print, he said he doesn't have it. mean, that's what's going on here with the nonsense of deceiving the American public. So I'm glad you mentioned that piece, because it's very important. And I'll get into the madness of...
Yeah, we'll come back after the break here at the top of the hour, number one, ladies and gentlemen. See how fast it goes? And that's why I'm saying, and again, I'm proud of this, and thank you for spending the extra time, because in 1 hour, a subject like this that's earth-shattering is impossible to do well, in my opinion, and I think the listeners would agree. Ladies and gentlemen, more here on the special edition that we'd like to call this particular show, the Dr. Sky Experience, with Robert Tannenbaum, attorney, novelist, and the author of That Day in Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. We'll be right back.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
5 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hour number 2 and joining us as we continue to broadcast great information, as you tell us, from the normal realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, and stories of American exceptionalism, where this fits in with our very special guest, author Robert Tannenbaum. The book we're talking about, That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to join us in the conversation, we love those particular parts of conversation called dialogue. The number 1-800-848-9222. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, a further background of our special guest, Robert Tannenbaum. He was assistant district attorney in New York County, where he ran the Homicide Bureau, served as chief of the criminal courts, and was in charge of the DA's legal staff training program, mentored by the great Frank Hogan, who served as New York County district attorney for more than 30 years. And he was a special prosecution consultant on the Hillside Strangler case in Los Angeles. He defended Amy Grossberg in her sensationalized baby death case, and he represented 8 black plaintiffs in a major racial profiling case, and also, on a lighter note, served 2 terms as mayor of Beverly Hills. Mr. Tannenbaum, thanks for staying up with us. Appreciate the time greatly, and I'm sure the audience does.
Well,
let's continue on and talk a little bit more about Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, I'm still fascinated by this. He buys a rifle, he mail orders it for $18 or whatever back in the days when you just sent your money order and they mail it to his house. He goes by the name, the illusory name of Alec Heidel, a very strange guy, and you're talking about he was way more sophisticated and involved in this, but straight up, sir, you're saying, or are you saying, or are we getting this information, that he absolutely never squeezed maybe any of those rounds off of that rifle? Is that what I'm generally thinking we're talking about here from you?
That's what we're talking about from the evidence in the case.
Interesting.
And the evidence in the case is there was what we call exculpatory evidence, which you know about having covered trials. When a prosecutor tries a case and has exculpatory evidence that will benefit the accused, the very first thing you do is hand it over to the defense. And if necessary, you put this case on hold. Now, there's a lot of exculpatory evidence in this case. Oswald claimed, now it may not be true. He may have made it all up. We understand that as a possibility. Defendants on occasion do that, but DAs on occasion do. So it's not, it's not indigenous to the native person. But with respect to Oswald, the notion of exculpatory evidence is very important. He alleged that he was in the book depository, and he heard the shots fired, and he was with another woman who was a worker there, an employee, and they were drinking Cokes or something to that effect.
Yes,
and this is another area where I purposely kept it out of the book. I wanted to make sure that the book dealt with hardcore, irrefutable facts.
Got it.
And that, by the way, you had mentioned American exceptionalism on our ability to have our values. I'm glad you mentioned it, because the nature of the very nature of that, of the notion of exceptionalism, it is not an arrogant self-portrait of Americans.
No.
What it means is it's a creation of our moral belongings, and that we will receive justice from the performance of how we protect those things that are most precious to us. And what are those things? Things that you talk about all the time, I'm sure. And the nature of what we're talking about here in American exceptionalism is the morality our morality, and it's from our morality and the manner in which we behave towards others and ourselves that has distinguished Americans historically, and that has been passed down from the Scots-Irish, and it's been passed down from the Pilgrims. So there are important, significant breakthroughs that occurred in the 17th century that have defined American exceptionalism, and it's a question of how our soul, whether we have a soul that is non-negotiable, and that guides us in issues that are very, very significant. One of those issues is in the book by my boss, Frank Hogan, who was told by his staff that he had the DA's office locked up the wrong person in the case. It's a separate book I've done, but I mentioned it in my last book, That Day in Dallas, because it was an example of, it turned out that my bureau chief, my mentor, found out that the killer of a very brutal double murder case, all of which is in the book, and they locked up the wrong guy. They locked up a 19-year-old black kid. He was visiting his aunt in Brooklyn, and he's from New Jersey, and he had a photograph of a blonde in his back pocket, and he claimed, which he did, he found it in a garbage dump. The detectives in Brooklyn who questioned him for like 17 hours fed him everything he had. And he kept saying, I want to go home. Can I go home now? And you hear this kind of things that could break your heart. And they say, yeah, tell us. I've heard them. Yeah. All we want is the truth. We only want the truth. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, well, did you get the knife, for example, the murder weapon, the knife? The girls were disemboweled. It was a terrible case. And
horrible.
They were in the third floor. They were called the Korea Girl Murders. Korea Girl Murders. Look it up.
Exactly.
You'll see what I'm talking about.
I do.
And the bottom line to this whole story was Mel Glass, my mentor, which is in the book Echoes of My Soul, a nonfiction book, went to the district attorney, and he said, we locked up the wrong guy, and you were about to ready to try him, and he's on for the death penalty case. And Hogan said, tell me why you believe that. He did. Just imagine any other DA doing this, by the way. And he called in, and senior staff people had been there since 1935, some of them, as Hogan was when Tom Dewey was appointed to special prosecutor by Governor Lehman. So the Jewish governor of New York appointed Mr. Tom Dewey, Mr. Republican, because he didn't want it to be political. And Hogan then became DA in 42, and Dewey became the governor in 42, and of course he had those two incredible moments in history where he ran for president in 44 and 48 against Harry Truman in 48. Anyway, I mention all this because the nature of who we are is very much defined on how we take care of our soul. That is the issue here always.
Wow, do I like what you're saying, because the whole concept, I don't get into the politics of the whole thing, and then as I said, I'll delete the word politics or politician from your resume here, but you're so right. It's about credibility, and if I'm going to go into a courtroom, I want somebody that has the best of moral character, common sense. But you know what? This is so fascinating, Mr. Tannenbaum. I want to try to go to the callers because we have so many people, I'm sure, that would like to ask a question or comment. And with all due respect to them, let's see if Pete in Lakewood is with us. Pete in Lakewood, you're on with Robert Tannenbaum. Thanks for your patience. Yeah. Good morning.
Sir, you know about Malcolm McWillis?
What about him?
He had his fingerprints were on the Markham textbook department. You have heard of Roger Stone's book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against the case of LBJ?
No, I've never got into that aspect of any of this.
Interesting. Well, do you have another question or comment, Pete?
Let me finish. Yeah. He said that the like you were saying, CIA was involved. Rogue from the CIA, and Johnson is about to be prosecuted for some type of criminal activity, and that's why Kennedy had to be killed. That's why they killed Robert Kennedy too.
Again, you're raising interesting points here. But if I were to go into the Bobby Kennedy assassination, this would never end. My book would be larger than Vince Bugliosi's.
Exactly.
Pages.
It'd be more than 1,600 pages. Right.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that what I did was very concise, and that it was readily available in the evidence. And it was not my opinion what I'm talking about tonight. It's nothing that has to do with my opinion. It has to do with the evidence in the case. As a matter of fact, I went to see Lou Stokes, who was our chairman of the committee, a very fine fellow from Cleveland, Ohio. And I said, Lou, I'm concerned that some of the members of the committee are acting like this is a movie. They get up before I get up to speak at a hearing, and they want to praise everybody doing such a great job and helping us, and that's not the case. I said, so there's a couple of subpoenas that I'm thinking of having come forward here. One is to determine, because I have from sources, that, in fact, the CIA has material that indicates that they did, in fact, murder the president. And the question I want to ask them about any of this is, was it a rogue operation, or was it part of what the CIA's operation was in total? And he said, Bob, the committee, the senior members of the committee are not going to permit you to do this. I said, well, why'd you hire us?
Yeah, exactly.
I told you if you didn't want to get involved in politics, then we were the wrong guy here.
And you walked, right? I mean, you walked after all this. I mean, on your own volition, correct? I mean, if that's what I'm reading?
Yes, at this meeting. Lou looked at me, and he said, now what do you want to do? I said, Lou, I sat up in my chair, looked him right in the eye, and said, I'll resign effective right now. I'm going to see Sprague in an hour. And I can't forecast what he will do, but I believe he will resign as well. You violated your major promise to us. It's your committee. It's not ours. Believe me, if this were our committee, we would not leave. We'd fight you tooth and nail. But it's not our committee, period. So that's what happened with respect to our resignations in this case. And they asked me to stay on, as a matter of fact, for the follow, to have some continuity, which of course I did.
But it was supposed to be your investigation. You made it clear to them in the very beginning of this whole process, and I'm repeating that because you told us that. That's exactly right. Pete in Lakewood, thank you for calling. Sorry we don't have time. We want to try to stay on measure with the specifics that our good friend and author and attorney, Mr. Tannenbaum, is talking about. Let's say hello and good morning to Alexis in Queens, if you're with us. Your patience, of course, we appreciate. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, good morning, Alexis. You're on the air.
Yes, hello.
Yes, go ahead,
hello.
sir.
Okay. The gentleman you have there, Dr. Tannenbaum, I believe, he's a scholar in his own right. What astounds me is I came from communist country, formerly communist. Now it's a pseudo-democracy, so to speak, in the last 2 decades. I came here and I am surprised that the American government is so rife with these problems that no one can get the straight answer about this Kennedy assassination, with the Robert Kennedy assassination, the King, the attempt on Reagan, and so on. Even Trump. You have these very professionally set up events that are amazing, absolutely amazing, and the Secret Service may have been negligent, or this, or no, it can't be possible. And what I don't understand is why is this persisting? Why is this so persistent and so deep? Why is this happening in this country? I could see in my own country, the communists come in, they use their textbook. But I don't understand this. Why in this country?
Alexis, I'll jump in here. It's probably human nature, because everybody out there who's listening to this, I mean, not to sound naive here or to have anybody else like yourself sound naive, it's probably something in the human DNA, wouldn't you think, Mr. Tannenbaum? I mean, obviously governments do things that they want to do, and not everybody out there likes it. And there's a lot of dirt that we're talking about here. And this gentleman, Mr. Tannenbaum, is bringing up what for many years has been, everybody out there, even a fifth grader, I'm sure, would think that, hey, wait a minute, there's more to this mystery of this, mysterious murder that's never been solved, and a very important one. Mr. Tannenbaum, please continue.
Well,
I think
what it is the gentleman raises a very serious point,
right?
And that is the debate that has been going on in America for many, many, many decades, and that is from people who do not like to have free and open discussions. They don't encourage people to speak. I could tell you this, when I was mayor of the city, very small city, I encouraged people to come down to City Hall, particularly if they disagreed with us. I wanted the best arguments to be heard and used. But that's not what's going on, unfortunately, right now. And when
use critical thinking, right? Critical thinking should be some part of the process, right?
Absolutely, and common sense. And common sense. So,
Amen.
And the issues are very clear, and regrettably, to have an open border, let's just use that one, for example, because I don't imagine any rational person thinks that was a good idea. It's a terrible idea, but it was also a selfish idea because the political group thought that it would be good to have illegals come in and then be able to pay them less than the wage that was demanded by unions, and that they would then vote for the particular people who let them in. So these things are what we call in Brooklyn, forgive me, but it's a perfect word, a shanda. And that's the shamefulness of what has been going on. But I do want to mention a problem that the committee, or rather that popped up as a result of all of this lying that was going on by our government, and that was in December of '63, the Secret Service and the FBI found that Connally and Kennedy were shot by two separate bullets, and both were shot within 1.9 seconds of each other. Well, but here's the problem. The problem is the Manico-Calcano bolt action necessary for the Manico-Calcano rifle to fire separate, successive shots from the alleged murder weapon, the Manico-Calcano, takes 2.3.
Yep.
Why has the government ever told us this? Therefore, the Manico-Calcano could not have fired both shots. Let me repeat that very quickly, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead. Try that again. We just lost you in probably one of the most prolific statements ever. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the necessary firing of that successive shots from the Manico-Calcano takes 2.3 seconds. So other than the first shot, there are other shooters in this case. Now, what I just said is clear evidence in the case. All anyone had to do, and the government knows all this.
So what do they think? We're very stupid, of course, over the years. And you know what's very interesting? I've shot that rifle. Yours truly. Not that I'm special. It's just that I'll say it for the third time and maybe the fourth time if I need to. That was the sloppiest piece of junk rifle that I ever owned, and I bought it on purpose. And I went to California to a place which I won't name the company because they're still in business. They're a great, highly reputable, gun store, whatever's left in California. And I actually had the same scope that Oswald had that they sold. They advertised it. I had and this gets deep here, but bear with me for a moment, folks. I had a gunsmith drill and tap the side of that rifle, put that same scope that Lee Harvey Oswald had. And again, maybe now for the fourth and last time, I couldn't agree more with you. It was the rifle that I doubt if anybody, even a super marksman, which I'm not, it was a slow, sloppy rifle, more to your point, sir, that couldn't have happened the way we've been told in the Warren Commission, et cetera, correct?
Absolutely right. And that's what the shameful part of all this is, because when I was in Washington, I worked with a very, very wonderful associate person there who was the photographic consultant to the committee. And we know at Zapruder frame 255, for example, there was no more action on the limo. So somewhere at 230, frame 230, there were the shots had already stopped, and that led us to frame Z as in Zapruder 313. That frame shows us it's the fourth shot, and it came out in a crashing sound, and it was done. It was the fourth shot, and that fourth shot came with a boom blast. Now, if you were on top of the bridge watching the motorcade come by you on Elm Street, your head would have turned immediately to the left because it was a boom.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that boom blast then blew out JFK's head, the back of his head. And you mentioned the CIA agent. He just recently passed away, Clint Hill.
We met him and we sat down together. We had lunch and look, I'm jumping over your story and I don't mean to, but just for the audience. No, this is interesting. I spent time with him and, I asked him in a polite but yet firm and consistent manner, tell me about your belief about Oswald as the lone gunman. And he just looked at me with the steel eyes and he looked at me and said, he did it. And that's the end of that story. And I was like, wow, I was respectful.
That's exactly it.
But exactly that. It's amazing. It is.
When I just talked to when I worked with Bob Groden, and he had been dedicated his life to doing all this research and so on. In my judgment, he's a very honest, decent, hardworking, dedicated person, and that was my experience with him. And we were looking at all of the fragments that were caused, but we didn't have a bullet. And the two of us, when we went over the frame from 313 to 328, that's Z328 after Z313. And it turned out that was the fifth shot that we found. And how do we know it? Kennedy's head was hit at the top, the cowlick. He was already dead. And his head moved forward because of the force that it
That's
engendered.
a horrible picture. I mean, not to get too graphic here. I mean, people, if you have a sensitive stomach, I never knew that there was a colorized version. I never saw that picture of what looks like what, Mr. Tannenbaum, the autopsy pictures.
Yes, the autopsy
It's the most horrible thing you've ever seen, but you don't see the face disappear. You just see what? The top, as you're describing, the right portion of the head is just totally severed as far as blasted away. That's terrible.
That's exactly right.
Worse than,
and then it's interesting because Connolly, you see, this is how you have to know the facts of the case before you pontificate. Anyone does. Why was it that Connolly finally dropped his Stetson hat? During all of the shooting, just as President Kennedy was grabbing his fists because he was hit in the back with the third, the first flurry of shots, we have Connolly holding on to the white Stetson hat. It's sort of like he was holding it on upside down so he can flip it on his head. He never causes it to drop until he is struck in the wrist and that tendon to the right thumb area to the index finger. The axial nerve was hit with the fragment, and that fragment caused Connolly to drop his Stetson. And it was from that we came up with the fifth shot. So it wasn't as though we walked in there with anything that was going to interfere with any theory or anything else. We had none. And we didn't. Sprague and I wouldn't tolerate anybody who did. This was whatever you say, you better be ready to add, you better be ready to back it up with hardcore facts.
Well, the book, as we're talking about here, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, that day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot JFK. He, our special guest, Robert Tannenbaum, is talking about empirical evidence by looking deeper into the facts. And we're not talking about, other conspiracy theories, or he's not getting into really what happened with J.D. Tippit, the officer shot allegedly by Lee Harvey Oswald, the capture in the movie theater when, war is hell and all that breaking out. It's about, when I'm going to give a summary here for everybody because we're almost up at the bottom of the hour in the hard break. Here it is. We're talking, in your opinion, CIA involvement covered up for so long, not that people didn't think that could be possible. We can't yet really prove it. Maybe you have more information in the book that can, gives beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're not talking about 3 rounds shot. We're talking about 5 in total summation. And we're not talking about from the rear. We're also talking frontal shots. And where did they come from? I stood on the grassy knoll. Maybe many people have. The whole place to me, Mr. Tannenbaum, reminds me of a little tiny movie set. And if you go there, ladies and gentlemen, there's usually a police officer on a bike, a bicycle police officer, and they'll talk to you about that. But what struck me as so amazing and so surreal is the place looks like it was set up in a studio, that whole environment there. And that we're hearing now, we're hearing from Mr. Tannenbaum that another shot may have come, probably in your book, as you described, from another building high at the top with a declination, a lot of other information. But let me mention this before we go to that break. We see the number of phone calls coming in here, and we'll do our very best, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you more than you can imagine. And obviously, a powerhouse like this, Mr. Tannenbaum, talking about his book. So important here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get to the bottom of this. Will we ever be told the truth? That's a question that I'm going to ask you for a minute. We got about a minute before the break. Will we ever get the truth? And I think I know what the answer is going to be. You go on, sir.
Okay, look, the answer is I'm an optimist. I believe there are a lot of good people out there. There are a lot of good people out there, believe me. I know many of them, and yet there are many I don't, obviously. But they're good. They're competent. They've been trained well. They're not aggrandizing from being a so-called celebrity. That's the last thing you want to get involved in. It's just, you know what they say, just the facts, man, just the facts. And that's what this is truly all about. Because in the book, you'll see when I talk about the single bullet theory, And we see when the government actually conducted these tests into wadding and cotton wadding, and then into the wrist and the rib of JF into the wrist of the cadaver, and then the deformity is major when it hits the wrist and rib. Mostly, it's all there in the book, so you can see.
More with Mr. Robert Tannenbaum, author of That Day in Dallas, ladies and gentlemen. The subtitle, of course, Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot and kill. That is JFK. We'll be right back on the Dr. Sky Experience.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Robert, let's continue with the phone calls here because, wow, this is really lighting up here. Let's say good morning to Christine in Manhattan. You're on with Robert Tannenbaum. How are you this morning?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. This is a fascinating subject, and I believe that I think I know who killed Kennedy.
Do you?
Do you remember this? Yeah. I remember this Zapruder film. We've all seen it, different versions of it, blah, blah, blah. Kennedy was shot, and Jackie Kennedy vaulted up and out the back of the limousine. She was fleeing from the shooter. And the shooter was the driver named Greer from the SS, and he killed him with a bullet from the front, just like they say. And it was doctored up with shellfish toxin, and that's the reason why the brain later disappeared and why the blood was all washed away.
Yes.
They couldn't trace that. And if you recall, it was JFK who honored the guy who created, what was his name, Werner von Braun. He was a Nazi war criminal that worked on the bomb.
Well, Christine, I hate to cut you short because it's not your fault at all. We're probably getting some solar emanations about like solar flares or something, but I think Robert Tannenbaum had heard most of what you said. And your response, Christine, you'll have to take the answer off air because we were losing you through that. I hope we heard that. Robert, what did you think?
That's why Jackie went to the back of the car has always been subject to speculation, because she just didn't sit down and say, okay, I'm going on the back of the car because I want to find my husband's head. That never happened. But it was sort of the only rational reason that she responded in that way during a completely irrational moment. And, it's a heartbreaking moment. But one cannot speculate and be accurate in any of this. Speculation is not part of what the program should be. Not your program, but I mean to say the program in general.
I hear you. Right.
Programs in general. It's just got to be stick to the facts of the case, get the book, and see what the evidence is. And make
it's very well. It's simple. You put it in common sense, and it's very interesting because people like Christine in Manhattan, they bring up all these good things. And I just want everybody to know, ladies and gentlemen, especially to the younger listeners who may not have been alive at the time of this horrible event, that the Warren Commission, of course, describes, and we're going to say it again, a cruel and shocking act of violence. I mean, there's not a powerful bunch of words, but Clint Hill, the gentleman we were just talking about that you heard on the Dr. Sky Experience, we sat and talked with him, and I'm sure you have in the past, that he's the gentleman that you see jumping up on the back of the limo when Mrs. Kennedy is obviously trying to move out from this horrible event. Amazing. Totally incredible.
Yeah.
Let's continue here. We got so many people that want to say a few words and comment as we go along. Let's say good morning to Dave in New York. You've been patient. Good morning, Dave. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, Dr. Sky. Hey, Steve, I'm Delray Dave. You know who I am. I've talked to you before.
I know, and I have to be honest. I haven't read the book that you told me about, but I will get to it. But go ahead, please. Short.
Anyway, Kennedy was shot the day before my 13th birthday, and we watched it over and over on the next day in color. And there is no way, first of all, I have a Carcano just like you do, and they're notoriously inaccurate, and the reason is because they had a great idea. They wanted a gain twist, which would stabilize the bullet more. They heated the barrel after it was rifled and twisted it. And if you had one that was accurate, it was super. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Number one, there's no way, you know about ballistics just like I do, there's no way that the back of your head comes off when you're shot from the back. Okay, so he was shot from the front. And the other thing is, Lyndon Baines Johnson was under investigation, and that investigation mysteriously stopped when he became president.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Mr. Tenenbaum, your response? I mean, this is interesting, Dave. We have to be brief here because we got a lot of people.
Look, the gentleman's right. LBJ said to the CIA people, you want a war, you're going to have your war now. That was when they got on that plane to come back after JFK was. You want a war, I'll give you the war.
Yeah, because Kennedy didn't want the war. I know that. Obviously, that's one of the big points. But this is interesting. We talk about all this stuff as going through history here with ballistics and things like that. And again, I repeat again for the final and last time, the Carcano, as Dave in New York is testifying, was a very sloppy rifle. But still the mystery about this man, Lee Harvey Oswald, still a bizarre character. And, you know, you find out what? You know so much more about him. He gets to get into Russia. That would be very difficult in those days when they were truly the Soviet Union and ruled with an iron fist. How the heck did he even do that unless he was involved with this whole espionage world, both sides of the equation? It's amazing.
Well, he was. I mean, there's no question.
Yeah.
The other side of it, please mention, if you would, how does he come home without being investigated?
Exactly. A cover-up there of massive proportions. Let's continue here on the caller line as we move through time and space. Let's say good morning. They've patiently waited. Mark in Connecticut. Good morning. How are you? Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, I wasn't sure where to start because I know you have a lot of callers, and I'm going to keep it brief. But
okay,
I had just going back to the morality of the exculpatory evidence when presented to a prosecutor. Sir, I've had a family member that was convicted of manslaughter 30 years ago. Spent 8 years in prison, and I would be the biggest supporter of giving people either a second chance or the Innocence Project. But you know as well as I do, with prosecutors, police, judges, once you're in the system, they're going to turn the narrative the way they want, just like they've done with the Kennedy assassination. So, I mean, we all want to think that the prosecutors, the police, and the people that are so-called in charge are going to be stand-up people. That's not true. That's a bunch of crap. I know from the fact that when my brother was the police were on the stand, and the larger picture is you want to think that they're but they don't. The judges, the prosecutor will get another notch on his belt. There are people sitting in prison as we speak, and I'm a right-wing, gun-owning nut job that you would call me, but I support people in this, the Innocent Project. You know, they ran a presidential candidate, and I just want to bring it forward a little bit. Kamala Harris, she sat on tons of exculpatory evidence for defendants, and it's just I get frustrated, get angry because you know my brother served his time. But
yes.
What the system is against you, man, and it even happened to me in my personal life. If someone accused me of workplace violence, it never actually happened, and I had no way because it was just no way to prove. There's lots of people, there's thousands of millions of stories out there about how people, if the people above you have the power, they're going to use it and they're going to smile. They're going to go to the judges and the prosecutors, the defense attorneys. They're going to sit and have drinks together. They don't give a damn about the little people. And if you're
Mark,
ignorant,
let me stop you for a second. Let me just stop you respectfully. Your passion and pain comes across the airwaves loud and clear. I never had a personal experience like that. But Mr. Tenenbaum, your response. I mean, here we hear a caller who obviously has experience in things of this nature, and obviously it's pretty painful, I imagine. You bet.
No, without question. I'm not an apologist for corrupt people in the government. God knows that. I have a whole history of that. As a matter of fact, Frank Hogan, district attorney, was criticized by some people saying he wasn't tough enough on the police. You know what? You know how I know that's a phony argument? When I was first in that office, after several months, I had a case with the Narcotic Addiction Control Commission. Nobody even remembers it probably. But it was a locked facility. And in that locked facility, a bunch of the head of the legal aid department came into my office with Mel Glass, who was my mentor, as I mentioned, and mentioned him extensively in my book. And Mel said, I'd like you to listen to this case. And there was a kid there, Jewish kid. He had his head all wrapped up and blood was oozing out and so on. And I said, well, sit down. And I had a detective there. I said, what's going on here? And the kid said, well, we try to escape. And then the detective interrupted right away. He said, wait a minute. You're telling us here that you try to escape and you got a bloody head and that's why you're complaining?
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
He says, come on, give us a break here, will you? We're not that dumb. And the kid without moving said, that's not the reason we're here. I got kicked in the head by a cop. I deserved it. I was trying to break out. You didn't let me finish. The next day when we were in lockup, 2 detectives came in and kicked the shit out of us and knocked out Jose Ortiz's eye. That's why we're here. Now, that is the kind of credibility you want to have when you're trying a case like this. I tried that case, and the defense attorney was a well-known character who used to be in the DA's office. He came in to tell Mel that no one's going to try the case, blah, blah, blah. Mel said, that's not the case at all. He said, why? Because Tannenbaum's going to try the case. Guess what? He actually tries cases. He doesn't bullshit his way around. And I did try the case. The defendants were convicted, and they went to jail. Each of the defendants, I believe there were 4 of them. This is many decades ago. I believe that the 4 of them were going to be police officers for NYPD. That's how serious the case was. So I don't want to. I respect everyone who winds up with a case that they believe firmly, even if it's not the case. But it's
well, thank you, Mark, in Connecticut, for giving us your story of exculpatory evidence and a painful process that it is. We appreciate you. And Mr. Tannenbaum, this is interesting. When we come back from the break, I want to play something that I think everybody well, maybe not everybody has heard this, but the strange ending of this mystery man, Lee Harvey Oswald, in the bottom, well, down in the basement, I gather, of the Texas Police Department on the 24th of November. We'll be talking about that because, and then I want you to kind of wrap up some of this because I want people to understand the focal point here. We're talking about CIA involvement as it's documented here very well in your book, and that's what you're alleging. That 5 shots, not 3, and obviously not from the top of the Texas School Book Depository, but in the frontal areas, the side, the fatal shot that you describe, and so much more. And it's very simply, it's all about just doing the investigative journalism and reporting that you're doing to bring this to us and bring it to us in a very interesting form. The book, That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald Did Not Kill JFK. If we haven't gotten you on the line, we'll do our very best to see how we can do that. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's an interesting story that I think really, it's just so fascinating to me. I sit back and looking at knowing Mr. Bugliosi and going through his book where he believed that it was just Lee Harvey Oswald and that the reason he said that he shot him, I mean, this is not verbatim, is that he and his wife had an argument the night before and that what he did, he was filled up with such pent and hatred for the president that was the motion when his wife pushed him out of bed or something. This is what was reported. And he went down there very angry with his rifle hidden with a bunch of wrapping paper, and they were asked him when he went in, what is that? And he said, curtain rods, gentlemen, and the rest is history. We'll be right back with our very special guest, Robert Tannenbaum, and hopefully as many callers as we can get on the air on the Dr. Sky Experience.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
47 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, wrapping up our 2-hour journey through time and space. And we appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. How about this? Lee Harvey Oswald, a strange character in history, ladies and gentlemen, born October the 18th, 1939, died November the 24th, 1963, charged with murder with malice, the assassination of the 35th President of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. This is exactly what happened, at least how it sounded. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, if you're young enough and you don't remember this, NBC News reporter Tom Pettit was in that area when they opened up this big security vehicle, like one of those, vaults on wheels. And here comes the murder suspect out in the basement of the Dallas Police Department. Here we go. This is how it sounded. And do we have that sound clip?
There is Lee Oswald. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. It's absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives have their guns drawn. Oswald has been shot. There is no question about it. Oswald has been shot. Pandemonium has broken loose here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Now, whether the bullet literally hit Oswald or not, we are not absolutely positive, but there has been a gunshot. Oswald reached for his stomach, doubled up. It'll be impossible to determine whether he was hit or not. Did you see whether or not he was hit? He was hit, wasn't he?
He grabbed himself on the side and fell to the ground.
That was my understanding.
Totally amazing, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not old enough to remember that, we played it for history, because that, to me, Mr. Tenenbaum, is so strange. Jack Ruby standing there, a nightclub, strip club owner, as we know, and all the details I'm sure you have, pulls out a small .38 Colt Agent, and from that distance, he could never have missed, and he fires into his abdomen. That's just amazing. I mean, and what does Oswald say beforehand? I'm just a patsy? I mean,
think about that. That's an important piece of evidence in the case, in my judgment.
Yes,
when
sir.
you put this whole case together, because of the absence of hardcore evidence that Oswald had anything to do with the assassination, that Oswald was picked up walking a long distance away from the depository and had a jacket on, like a zipper jacket. Why would any police officer stop him? What kind of nonsense is this? In addition to which, the Carousel Club, which was Ruby's club, they had Tippit and Oswald allegedly had dinner together, like on the Thursday night before the assassination. So there's a lot of this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And look, as my boss used to say, show me the evidence, and we'll take care of what your concerns are. Believe me.
No, you say it so well. Let's go to one more caller if we can, or for that matter, as many as we can. And hopefully Jerry in New Jersey is still with us. Good morning. Your question, comment, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning. I have two questions. First question is, and I'll be very brief, is do you have any idea from all the evidence that you have gathered, Mr. Tenenbaum, who you think, if not a name, what group he came from, like CIA employee or mafia, he was hired as a contractor, etc., the shooter on the grassy knoll or the shooter who was in the front and who made the shot to the head from the front and side?
Well, we know from the autopsy that the shot that hit the president came from the front, the geographical front. Nobody was in Elm Street firing at the car as it was moving. That's not what we say. The geographical front was from the stockade fence area where you heard that boom blast. That was the fourth shot that blew his head off. And that's what came from the geographical front, I think, is the best way to explain that. So, and that's what the evidence is in the case. It's not anything made up. You get a hold of the book and you'll see the autopsy report graphically describing where the shot hit the president.
It's interesting, and I'm reading from your book, if you don't mind me, sir, just to take the liberty as the time we have left. You talk about the Parkland Hospital doctors. They see this gaping hole in the back of the president's head, to wit. Also, the three autopsists, 2 FBI agents, 3 Secret Service agents see it, 5 technicians, 1 Navy corpsman, and 1 mortician. There's what? Irrefutable evidence right there. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, well, and you have to ask the following question in my judgment. Why were none of those doctors called to testify? And you hit it on the head. The Parkland chief of neurosurgery was there, Dr. Kemp Clark from Dr. Robert McClellan had drafted a vivid diagram depicting the gaping hole in the back of the president's head. And on it goes. So why would the government lie, and believe that nobody would find the truth? Well, they don't care. But nevertheless, they're lies, as I went over here. I'm not going to do it again. But it's all there in the book to read, and it's very clear. So that's what's shameful about all this. Not only that they thought of themselves as participants in some fashion, that's what the evidence says at least, and yet they continue to lie about what was going on here, particularly the shot to the back of the head. Heads do not go backwards that are shot from the back.
Well, again, this is interesting. It's not I don't talk politics per se, but American exceptionalism, you bet. I'm with you, my brother, and all the people listening. But it's very interesting, as President Trump, of course, is trying to do what? To clean out and just dry up the swamp. Right.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because there's an important part I just wanted to mention about President Trump. He said he would do this in his first term, and for whatever reason, some people got to him, and he said it was too nasty a scene to watch. Mm-hmm. Okay, now he's changed his position, thank God. Everything he's letting out, good. The only person who can change this entire drama is the chief executive, in my judgment. He is the only person who was elected by the people, and he can move to assemble a group of people around the country and get to the truth of this. I'm not a believer. I'm not a negative person who, we'll never find the truth out routine. Like I'm the only person who can give you.
You're an optimist. I like that. That's what we're hearing. Yeah.
Believe me, I am a big optimist.
I believe you.
I believe in the so-called flyover of America also, believe me. They're not about to surrender to anybody. Thank God for them. So it's an important concept for us to keep in mind.
Yes. You get the last word, sir, the summation of this book that everybody should go out and get if they're fascinated by not only the work that you've done in the legal field, but also the evidence that you put forth here. And it's evidence that is solid, and it explains it in the book. And it's not really a long book, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking, Mr. Tannenbaum, 130-some pages. It gets right to the point.
Yeah, right, exactly. About 160 pages, counting the intro stuff. It's all important stuff. But you're right. I mean, what we're talking about here is to put all this together. That's why I urge people to read the book, because don't take my word for any of it. Read the book and decide for yourself whether or not it's convincing. I say it's overwhelming, but that's what my point of view is about having tried. I did this for 10 years out of law school when I was in the DA's office. And if I tried on the average 2 cases a month, you could do the math. That's how many cases I tried.
Correct.
That's why I said that Dick Sprague is the only person, I'll repeat that, because my affection for him as a great human being. And we worked together for many years after this, after we became friendly down in this portion of the time we spent in D.C. And I couldn't praise him enough for the kind of person he was. There's a big difference between the two of us. I was trained by the best in the DA's office. He wasn't. And
Frank Hogan, you got it. Frank Hogan.
And yet Sprague was brilliant. Yep. That's all I have to tell you. God bless you.
Well, let me say this in closing. This is interesting. A part of the your life story we really haven't gotten into. And if you'd be kind enough to look at the opportunity of an invite back here in the future, I'd like to talk more about this subject as it evolves. But your amazing stories that you're writing as a novelist here. I mean, we're talking a total of like 30-some books that you've been responsible for. The Piano Teacher, A Story Again.
Yeah, 29 novels and five nonfiction books.
No, fascinating.
That Day in Dallas is my 5th nonfiction book. Echoes of My Soul, I urge you to read. It talks about how Hogan was told by his senior staff to just simply lie and take a plea from a guy who didn't commit the crimes. And that's when Hogan stood up in front of his senior staff. There were 20 people in that room. And he said, what I want to know is, you want me to lie so my reputation won't be damaged, because it's a terrible thing that we did here. My name is on that indictment. It's a phony indictment. It's not true now. We know we have the wrong person. Is that correct? Is that what you want me to do? And they said, yes, as a matter of fact. We want you to do it because there are also statements. The defendant made statements. Everybody knows that. Therefore, nobody will believe other statements in other cases. If we didn't believe it in this case, why would we believe it in any other case? And he said, jammed his fist on the desk as he stood up. He said, what I want to know is, when did we become so corrupt? That tells you who he was.
Well,
and
that's amazing.
He sent Mel Glass down into the courtroom to dismiss the case against George Whitmore, this kid who's just a wonderful character who got mixed up in this thing, having no criminal involvement at all. So that's why it's so important to be on the alert on these cases. And my heart goes out to anybody, and particularly the individual. We're talking about wrongfully accused of his relatives. I don't know if that was the case.
The exculpatory evidence, right?
Exculpatory evidence issues, and it's, the whole system is heartbreaking. You want to avoid it like the plague, believe me.
Mr. Tannenbaum, thank you. I really appreciate you. And I mean, what could have been a 1-hour interview and not doing justice to the topic, you've been kind enough to give us, even though you're on the West Coast, and to everybody listening around the nation and the world. We appreciate you, sir, and hope we can do this again and talk in depth about the latest revelations of what the Trump administration may be trying to do to release information that will corroborate what you're saying here. But, wow, I'm going to be an optimist too, but I think that's a tall order, but we're going to keep our minds open and be positive about the whole equation. I want to thank you, sir, for spending time on WABC, and we appreciate you.
I want to thank you. ABC's always been a big, big program, and we lived in Brooklyn, believe me.
God bless. You bet. And they say on this radio station, I need not remind the regular listeners, from John Catsimatidis and family and the executive staff, maybe you don't hear this every day, but they talk about something called truth, justice, and the American way. And I visited them back in October, and I brought with me to give to Mr. Catsimatidis, and I believe it's still in their major studio, the Superman circular plaque, Truth, Justice, and the American Way. I think that fits totally with what we're talking about here, don't you think?
I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you, sir. We'll talk soon. And everybody listening around the nation and the world, thank you for joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience. I pledge we'll get back to some other topics that are more in line, but what could be more in line than American exceptionalism stories and truth and justice? We'll be back, of course, in less than 24 hours. But thanking the navigators of our show, Tony and Bill, who make the signal and the powerhouse sound of 77 WABC coming to you as powerful and as linear as it should, ladies and gentlemen. And as we continue to move on to time and space, I believe we now pass the torch to TJ McCormack on the other side of midnight. And if you'd like to learn more about this particular show, go to listen to the archival part that we have at WABCRadio.com, where you can listen to the podcasts, and RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. Thank you, clear skies, good health, and we'll see you in less than 24 hours.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Roger Stone here for Colonial Metals Group. They nailed every call on gold's explosive rally, beating the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, even Bitcoin. And now they're warning the next surge is already underway. Get their free gold guide now at freegoldguide.com/stone or call 800-747-6589. That's 800-747-6589. Learn how to move your savings into physical gold, 100% tax-free. That's freegoldguide.com/stone.